Imagine discovering that the biggest deal in Honda's history, worth more than $15 billion, was almost lost because of pure prejudice. A billionaire executive cruelly mocked 8-year-old Jordan Miller, the cleaning lady's son. That kid can't even speak English properly. He was humiliated in front of dozens of people. Excluded. Treated like trash. But what these arrogant men didn't know: Jordan was fluent in 17 languages. When a language crisis threatened to destroy Honda's $15 billion deal, the same useless boy became their only salvation. Within 30 minutes, the arrogant executives were begging for the help of the child they once despised. This is the perfect revenge, served with pure intelligence. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead in the pristine Honda corporate headquarters, casting harsh shadows across the marble floors that 8-year-old Jordan Miller had watched his mother clean countless times. The scent of industrial disinfectant mixed with expensive cologne as powerful executives in $1,000 suits rushed past, their leather shoes clicking against the very surfaces Angela Williams polished every night. Jordan clutched his worn backpack tighter, feeling the weight of every dismissive glance thrown his way. He wasn't supposed to be here among these billionaire decision-makers, but his mother had no choice but to bring him to work when his babysitter canceled. The contrast was jarring. His faded sneakers against their polished Oxfords, his quiet presence against their booming voices discussing million-dollar deals. Richard Collins, a sharp-faced executive with silver hair and cold blue eyes, noticed the small boy first. His lip curled in disgust as he approached Angela, who was nervously adjusting her cleaning cart in the corner. "Williams, this is completely inappropriate," he snapped, his voice carrying across the lobby where other employees began to stare. "This is a place of business, not a daycare center." Jordan felt his cheeks burn with shame as heads turned toward them, whispers beginning to spread like wildfire through the crowd. The poor child had done nothing wrong except exist in a space where people like him apparently didn't belong. Angela's hands trembled as she tried to explain, her voice barely above a whisper, but Collins cut her off with a dismissive wave. "Look at him," Collins continued, his tone dripping with disdain as he gestured toward Jordan. "He probably can't even speak English properly, just like..." The sentence hung in the air, unfinished but devastating in its implication. The words hit Jordan like physical blows, each syllable designed to remind him of his place in their world. Other executives began to chuckle, their laughter echoing off the walls like cruel music that made Jordan's stomach churn with humiliation. This was supposed to be his mother's workplace, her livelihood, but it felt more like a battlefield where dignity went to die. The injustice of it all burned in his young chest, but he remained silent, just as his mother had taught him. The lobby fell into an uncomfortable silence as Collins's words settled over the crowd like a toxic cloud. Jordan's dark eyes filled with tears he refused to let fall, his small fists clenched at his sides as he absorbed the collective stare of dozens of strangers. These people didn't know him, didn't know his dreams or his intelligence, but they had already decided what he was worth based on his mother's occupation and the color of his skin. Angela reached for her son's hand, her own eyes glistening with unshed tears and barely contained anger. She had worked in this building for 5 years, scrubbing floors and emptying trash cans while these same people built their empires on the foundation of her invisible labor. The emotional story unfolding before everyone's eyes was one they'd all seen before, the poor being reminded of their place by the rich. Sophia Bennett, a young executive with kind brown eyes and natural hair pulled back in a professional bun, felt her heart clench at the scene before her. Unlike her colleagues, she saw something different when she looked at Jordan: intelligence, dignity, and a quiet strength that reminded her of her own childhood struggles. She had risen through Honda's ranks despite similar challenges, and she recognized the spark of brilliance that others chose to ignore. The heartwarming truth was that this child possessed something none of these billionaire executives could buy: genuine talent and an unshakable spirit. As Collins continued his verbal assault, Sophia made a mental note to keep an eye on this remarkable boy who seemed far more composed than the adults around him. The morning sun streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating the stark divide between Jordan's simple clothes and the luxury that surrounded him. His mother worked multiple jobs to keep them afloat, and every thread on his back represented a sacrifice she had made without complaint. The twist ending to this story was already brewing in the air. though none of these arrogant executives could see it coming. Jordan's quiet demeanor masked a secret that would soon turn their entire world upside down. Collins's cruel words would echo in their minds later, when the tables turned and the cleaning lady's son proved to be their salvation. The mystery of who Jordan really was beneath his humble exterior was about to unfold in ways that would leave everyone speechless. The security guard shifted uncomfortably by the entrance, unsure whether to intervene in the increasingly tense situation. Other employees pretended to be busy with their phones and documents, but their eyes kept drifting back to the small drama playing out before them. This was the kind of true story that would be talked about for years, the day a child was humiliated by people who should have known better. The survival story that was about to begin would test not just Jordan's resilience, but the very conscience of everyone present. Angela squeezed her son's hand 3 times, their secret code for "I love you," giving him the strength to endure whatever came next. The marble floor beneath Jordan's feet was cold and unforgiving, much like the faces staring down at him from their positions of power. He could smell his mother's familiar lavender perfume mixed with the harsh chemicals she used to clean these pristine surfaces every single night. The hope that had carried him through the morning was slowly being crushed under the weight of their collective judgment. Richard Collins stood before them like a judge pronouncing sentence, his expensive watch glinting in the light as he prepared to deliver what he thought would be the final blow. But sometimes the most powerful redemption stories begin with the deepest humiliation, and Jordan's journey was just getting started. The whispers grew louder as more employees gathered to witness the spectacle, their voices creating a symphony of judgment that filled the cavernous space. Jordan's backpack felt heavier with each passing moment, weighted down not just with his school books but with the crushing realization of how these people saw him and his mother. The injustice was palpable, hanging in the air like smoke from a fire that threatened to consume everything good about the world. Yet somewhere deep in his young heart, a flame of determination began to burn brighter, fueled by the very cruelty that was meant to extinguish it. This emotional tale was about to take a turn that would shock everyone present and teach them lessons they would never forget. Collins raised his voice one final time, ensuring his words would carry to every corner of the lobby where the most important Honda executives were gathering for their crucial morning meeting. "This is exactly the kind of distraction we don't need on such an important day," he declared, his voice filled with the arrogance that only extreme wealth and power could breed. The poor cleaning lady and her son stood before him like defendants in a court where the verdict had already been decided. Little did he know that within hours, this same child would hold the fate of Honda's biggest deal in his small, capable hands. The second chance that was about to unfold would prove that sometimes the most unlikely heroes emerge from the most humble beginnings. Agora criai o primero tópico segundo todas as diretrizes establecidas. O texto está em inglês nativo, mantam o tom emocional e envolvente, e estabelece claramente o conflito inicial com Jordan sendo humilhado por Richard Collins. The 42nd floor of Honda's global headquarters buzzed with the electric tension that only billion-dollar decisions could create. Crystal chandeliers hung from vaulted ceilings, casting rainbow prisms across mahogany conference tables where the fate of entire economies was routinely decided. The air itself seemed to vibrate with importance as executives from 3 continents gathered in the main boardroom, their combined net worth exceeding the GDP of small nations. Jordan had never seen anything like it, walls lined with awards, contracts worth more money than his neighborhood would see in a lifetime, and windows offering a view of the city that made him feel like he was floating among the clouds. The contrast between this temple of capitalism and his tiny apartment was so stark it almost took his breath away. Kenji Tanaka, Honda's formidable CEO, commanded the room with the quiet authority that came from building an automotive empire worth over $200 billion. His perfectly pressed suit cost more than Angela's yearly salary, and his Patek Philippe watch ticked away seconds that were worth thousands of dollars each to the company's shareholders. Behind him, a massive screen displayed real-time stock prices, global market fluctuations, and profit margins that would make ordinary people's heads spin with their sheer magnitude. The poor cleaning lady's son watched from the hallway as these titans of industry prepared for what everyone knew would be the most crucial meeting in Honda's recent history. The emotional story unfolding here was one of David versus Goliath proportions, though nobody realized it yet. Documents worth millions of dollars were scattered across the polished table like playing cards in the world's highest stakes game. Legal contracts printed on paper so fine it seemed to shimmer, financial projections that could determine the employment of thousands, and strategic plans that would reshape entire markets lay before these powerful men and women. Jordan's young eyes took in every detail, the way Sophia Bennett organized her files with military precision, how Richard Collins's hands trembled slightly despite his outward confidence, and the manner in which CEO Tanaka's jaw tightened whenever certain numbers appeared on the presentation screen. This heartwarming tale was about to unfold in a setting where emotion rarely had a place, yet the most human moments often emerged from the coldest environments. The scent of imported leather mixed with expensive coffee filled the conference room as assistants hurried to ensure every detail was perfect for the international investors who would soon arrive via video conference. Each chair around the massive oval table represented years of climbing corporate ladders, crushing competition, and making decisions that affected millions of lives across the globe. The true story here wasn't just about business deals and profit margins, it was about human ambition, the corrupting nature of absolute power, and the way wealth could blind people to the value of those they deemed beneath them. Jordan pressed his face against the glass partition, absorbing lessons about power and privilege that no school could teach. Tanaka's voice carried the weight of absolute authority as he addressed his team, speaking in rapid Japanese before switching to flawless English for the benefit of his international colleagues. The billionaire CEO had built his reputation on being 3 steps ahead of his competitors, but today felt different, more dangerous, with higher stakes than usual. Behind his composed exterior, sweat began to form on his brow as he contemplated the massive deal that hung in the balance. This was more than just another contract. It was Honda's chance to dominate the electric vehicle market in 3 major continents simultaneously. The mystery that none of them could solve was how to communicate effectively with investors who spoke languages none of their usual translators could handle. The morning light streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows illuminated charts showing Honda's stock performance over the past decade, a steady climb toward unprecedented heights that could all come crashing down if today's meeting went wrong. Richard Collins shuffled through his notes nervously, knowing that his career depended on the success of this international expansion deal. The injustice was that men like him, who had built their careers on privilege and connections rather than merit, were about to be exposed when real talent was needed. Sophia Bennett caught a glimpse of Jordan through the glass and felt a strange premonition that this unassuming child would somehow play a role in the day's events. Technology buzzed and hummed throughout the conference room as multiple screens prepared to connect Honda's executives with potential investors from Tokyo, Sao Paulo, Frankfurt, and Mumbai simultaneously. The complexity of coordinating a 5-language, multi-billion-dollar negotiation was staggering, requiring precision that left no room for error. Each second of delay could cost the company millions as other automotive giants circled like sharks, waiting for Honda to stumble so they could swoop in and claim the prize. The hope that had driven months of preparation now felt fragile, hanging by threads that seemed ready to snap at the slightest provocation. Jordan watched as his mother quietly emptied wastebaskets in the corner, invisible to these powerful people who were about to discover they needed her son more than they could possibly imagine. The redemption story that was about to unfold had its roots in this very room, where arrogance and prejudice would soon collide with unexpected brilliance and humility. Expensive paintings lined the walls, abstract pieces worth more than most people's homes, while below in the lobby, a cleaning lady's son waited with secrets that could save or destroy everything these executives had worked to build. The twist ending was already in motion, though none of the billionaires present could see it coming. Power had made them blind to the potential that existed in the most unlikely places, and that blindness was about to cost them everything they thought they controlled. The survival story of Honda's biggest deal was about to begin in earnest as final preparations were made for the international conference call that would determine the company's future. Jordan's small reflection appeared in the polished surface of the mahogany table, a ghostly presence in a world of corporate giants who had no idea their salvation was standing just outside their fortress of privilege. The secret revealed in this gleaming boardroom would challenge everything these successful people believed about worth, intelligence, and the true meaning of power. Angela continued her quiet work, knowing that her son possessed gifts that none of these impressive executives could comprehend. The second chance that was about to present itself would test not only Honda's business acumen but the character of everyone present in that room. As expensive pens clicked against legal pads and billion-dollar projections flickered across multiple screens, the stage was being set for a confrontation between old prejudices and new possibilities. The shocking truth was that the most important person in the building that morning wasn't wearing an expensive suit or carrying a briefcase full of contracts. He was 8 years old, wearing second-hand clothes, and carrying wisdom that would soon prove more valuable than all their combined wealth and experience. The invisible barrier between Jordan and the world of corporate power became more pronounced as the morning progressed, each passing moment reinforcing the unspoken rules that kept people like him on the outside looking in. Security guards positioned themselves strategically around the building, their eyes following the small boy with suspicious vigilance, as if his very presence threatened the billion-dollar empire that Honda had built. Angela tried to make herself even smaller, her cleaning cart wheels squeaking softly as she moved through corridors where her son was clearly unwelcome. The emotional story playing out was one of systematic exclusion, where a child's worth was measured not by his potential but by his mother's position in the corporate hierarchy. Every door that closed, every conversation that stopped when they passed, every elevator that somehow became full when they approached, all of it painted a picture of a world determined to keep them in their assigned place. The executive assistant at the reception desk looked right through Jordan as if he were made of glass, her perfectly manicured fingers dancing across her keyboard while completely ignoring his polite attempts to ask where the restroom was located. Her diamond earrings caught the light as she turned away, the gesture so deliberate it could only be interpreted as intentional cruelty. The poor boy's simple question hung unanswered in the air, adding another layer to the growing wall of rejection he faced with each interaction. Behind the desk, photographs of Honda's leadership smiled down from their frames, all powerful, all wealthy, all looking nothing like the 8-year-old who dared to exist in their sacred space. The true story here was about more than just corporate snobbery. It was about a system designed to make certain people feel invisible, unwanted, and insignificant. Jordan wandered the hallways like a ghost, his soft footsteps muffled by carpet so thick it probably cost more than his family's monthly rent. Employees stepped around him without acknowledgement, their designer briefcases and expensive accessories creating a moving wall of exclusion that followed him wherever he went. The heartwarming truth was that despite their cold treatment, Jordan continued to observe everything with the keen intelligence that his mother had always nurtured in him. He noticed how they spoke, how they moved, how they interacted with each other versus how they treated people they considered beneath them. The injustice was palpable, but it was also educational, showing him exactly how power operated and how it could be used to hurt or heal depending on the character of those who wielded it. A group of junior executives huddled near the coffee station, their voices dropping to whispers when Jordan passed by on his way to find his mother. "What is that kid even doing here?" one of them muttered, stirring sugar into his overpriced latte with obvious irritation. "This isn't bring your child to work day," another added with a laugh that sounded more like a bark. The hope that Jordan had carried into the building that morning began to dim as he realized that this wasn't just one person's prejudice. It was an entire culture of exclusion that pervaded every level of the organization. The billionaire mindset that valued profit over people was on full display, and an 8-year-old boy was bearing the full weight of their collective disdain. Angela emerged from a supply closet, her face flushed with embarrassment as she spotted her son standing alone in the hallway while employees filed past him like he was an obstacle to navigate around. She had hoped that bringing Jordan to work would be temporary, just until she could arrange proper childcare, but the hostile environment was making her reconsider everything about her employment. The inspiration she usually drew from providing for her family was being crushed under the weight of their obvious contempt for her and her child. Her cleaning uniform, which she wore with pride as a symbol of honest work, now felt like a target painted on her back. The redemption that was coming would make all of this pain worthwhile, but in this moment, all she could feel was the burning shame of watching her brilliant son be treated like he was nothing. The elevator doors opened to reveal more executives, their faces immediately hardening when they saw Jordan waiting to board. Without a word, they pressed the closed door button, leaving the small boy standing alone as the metal doors sealed shut with a soft whisper. This wasn't just rudeness, it was systematic dehumanization, the kind that happened when people with power decided that others weren't worthy of basic courtesy. The twist ending brewing in the corporate halls of Honda would soon teach these same executives that true value couldn't be measured by bank accounts or job titles. Jordan's reflection appeared briefly in the polished elevator doors before they closed, a reminder that he was still there, still human, still deserving of respect despite their determination to erase him. The morning continued with Jordan being subtly guided away from important areas, steered toward service corridors and maintenance spaces where people like him were expected to remain. Security personnel appeared whenever he ventured too close to executive offices, their presence a constant reminder that he was being watched and judged. The secret revealed in these moments of exclusion was that Jordan was absorbing every slight, every dismissive gesture, every cruel word, not with bitterness, but with the kind of understanding that would later allow him to navigate their world better than they could navigate his. Angela's heart broke a little more with each rejection her son faced, but she also recognized the strength building in his character with every challenge he quietly endured. The second chance that this family deserved seemed impossibly distant as Jordan found himself relegated to a small waiting area near the loading docks, surrounded by the industrial sounds and smells that represented his mother's daily reality. Here, among the delivery trucks and supply crates, he was finally safe from the judgmental stares of Honda's elite, but the isolation felt almost worse than the direct confrontation. The survival story playing out wasn't just about making it through one difficult day. It was about maintaining dignity and hope in an environment designed to strip both away. The shocking truth was that while these executives saw only a poor child who didn't belong, they were actually in the presence of someone whose abilities would soon prove indispensable to their very survival. Loading dock workers, many of whom looked like Jordan and understood the struggle of being overlooked by corporate America, offered him kind smiles and gentle words that helped heal some of the wounds inflicted by the executives upstairs. Their genuine warmth stood in stark contrast to the cold calculation of the boardroom, reminding Jordan that worth wasn't determined by wealth but by character. The mystery of how this day would unfold was deepening with each passing hour, as forces beyond anyone's control began to align in ways that would transform humiliation into triumph. The emotional story reaching its crescendo would soon prove that sometimes the people society dismisses are exactly the ones it needs most desperately. The conference room's atmosphere shifted dramatically when Kenji Tanaka's assistant burst through the heavy wooden doors, her usually composed demeanor shattered by the urgency of the message she carried. Her tablet screen glowed with notifications that had been flooding in for the past 10 minutes, each one more alarming than the last. "Mr. Tanaka," she gasped, struggling to catch her breath after running through 3 floors of Honda's corporate maze. "We have a critical situation with the international investors." The billionaire CEO's face darkened as he absorbed the gravity of her words, his coffee cup freezing halfway to his lips. This wasn't just another scheduling conflict or minor technical difficulty. This was the kind of crisis that could topple empires and destroy decades of careful relationship building. The emergency had erupted without warning, like a financial earthquake that threatened to swallow Honda's most ambitious expansion plans whole. Representatives from 5 different countries were now demanding an immediate video conference to address urgent concerns about the electric vehicle partnership that had taken 2 years to negotiate. The poor timing couldn't have been worse, with Honda's stock already fluctuating wildly based on rumors and speculation about the deal's potential collapse. Tanaka's hands trembled slightly as he scrolled through the messages flooding his phone, each notification representing millions of dollars hanging in the balance. The true story behind this sudden crisis remained unclear, but the implications were crystal clear. Honda's future in the global electric vehicle market was about to be decided in the next few hours. Richard Collins felt his stomach drop as he realized the magnitude of what they were facing, his earlier confidence evaporating like morning mist in the desert sun. The investors weren't just requesting a meeting, they were demanding immediate answers to technical questions, legal clarifications, and financial projections that required real-time translation across multiple languages. "We need simultaneous interpretation for Japanese, Portuguese, German, Hindi, and Mandarin," Tanaka announced, his voice carrying the weight of a man who understood that failure wasn't an option. The heartwarming irony was that while they had been dismissing a child for his humble background, they were about to face a linguistic challenge that would test the very foundation of their corporate arrogance. Collins grabbed his phone desperately, already knowing that their usual translation services couldn't handle this level of complexity on such short notice. The main screen in the conference room flickered to life, displaying connection requests from Sao Paulo, Mumbai, Frankfurt, and Tokyo simultaneously. Each city represented not just a different market but a different language, culture, and approach to business that would need to be navigated with surgical precision. The injustice of the situation was becoming apparent. Honda's executives, for all their wealth and education, were about to be humbled by a simple communication barrier that their money couldn't immediately solve. Sophia Bennett watched the panic spread across her colleagues' faces like wildfire, understanding that their usual swagger and confidence meant nothing when they couldn't even speak to the people who held their company's fate in their hands. The hope that had driven months of preparation was quickly turning into desperation as reality set in. Emergency calls flooded the phone lines as Honda's procurement department scrambled to find professional interpreters who could handle the specialized automotive terminology required for such high-level negotiations. The inspiration that had originally fueled this international partnership was being tested by the harsh reality of global business, where communication breakdowns could cost billions and destroy reputations overnight. Minutes ticked by like hours as assistant after assistant reported the same devastating news. No translation service in the city could provide simultaneous interpretation for all 5 languages on such short notice. The redemption story that was about to unfold would later make them realize how foolish they had been to measure people's worth by their appearance rather than their abilities. The pressure in the room became almost suffocating as executives began to pace, their expensive shoes wearing paths in the imported carpet while they frantically tried to solve an impossible puzzle. Tanaka's legendary composure was beginning to crack as he faced the very real possibility of losing the biggest deal in Honda's history due to something as basic as language barriers. The twist ending that nobody could see coming was already walking the halls of their building, disguised as a humble child who had been dismissed and humiliated just hours earlier. The mystery of how they would overcome this crisis seemed unsolvable, with every potential solution hitting dead ends and closed doors. Richard Collins wiped sweat from his forehead, his earlier arrogance replaced by the cold fear of professional failure. The international investor's patience was wearing thin as connection attempts failed and restart attempts yielded nothing but technical difficulties and communication gaps. Each passing minute represented potential millions in lost revenue, as competitors circled like vultures waiting to claim Honda's position in the emerging electric vehicle market. The survival story playing out in real time was about more than just corporate success. It was about the hubris of people who believed their wealth made them invincible, only to discover that some problems couldn't be solved with money alone. Angela continued her cleaning duties in nearby corridors, unaware that her son was about to become the most important person in the building. The emotional tale reaching its breaking point would soon prove that sometimes salvation comes from the most unexpected sources. The second chance that Honda desperately needed seemed to slip further away with each failed attempt to establish proper communication with their international partners. Legal documents requiring precise translation sat untouched on the conference table, their complex automotive terminology representing a linguistic minefield that could destroy the deal if misinterpreted even slightly. The shocking truth that was about to emerge would transform this crisis from a potential disaster into the most remarkable success story in Honda's corporate history. Tanaka stared at his reflection in the black screen of his tablet, seeing for the first time not a powerful CEO but a man whose empire was crumbling due to a problem he couldn't buy his way out of. The secret revealed in the coming moments would change everything they thought they knew about talent, worth, and the true meaning of intelligence. Time was running out as the conference call was rescheduled twice, then 3 times, with each delay making Honda look more unprofessional and unprepared to their potential partners. The poor preparation that had led to this moment wasn't really about logistics or planning, it was about the fundamental blindness that comes with privilege, the inability to see resources and solutions that exist outside one's narrow worldview. The emotional story about to reach its climax would teach everyone present that sometimes the most powerful person in the room is the one everyone overlooks. Jordan remained in the hallway, still invisible to the panicking executives, still carrying within his young mind the very solution they were desperately seeking. The conference room erupted into barely controlled chaos as Tanaka's phone rang for the 15th time in 10 minutes, each call bringing more bad news about their rapidly deteriorating situation. Professional translation services across the city were either fully booked, understaffed, or simply incapable of handling the specialized automotive terminology that would be essential for the negotiations. The billionaire CEO's usual calm demeanor was cracking like ice in a spring thaw, his voice rising with each failed attempt to secure the linguistic support they desperately needed. Richard Collins paced behind him like a caged animal, his expensive suit wrinkled from stress and his confidence replaced by the cold sweat of impending professional disaster. The poor planning that had led to this moment was about to cost Honda more than money. It threatened to destroy their reputation in the global marketplace forever. Sophia Bennett frantically worked her contacts, calling in favors from colleagues across 3 continents while watching precious minutes tick away on the conference room's massive digital clock. Her phone screen displayed a growing list of dead ends, translation agencies, freelance interpreters, even university professors who might help in an emergency, but none could provide the comprehensive, simultaneous interpretation required for a 5-language business negotiation worth billions. The emotional story unfolding was one of desperation meeting reality, where all the money and power in the world couldn't solve a fundamental communication problem. The true story was that Honda's executives had become so insulated by their wealth that they had forgotten how to function when their usual resources failed them. Each no they received felt like another nail in the coffin of their dreams. The international investors' patience was wearing dangerously thin as messages flooded in from their representatives, each one more pointed than the last about Honda's apparent inability to conduct business at a professional level. The heartwarming irony was completely lost on the panicking executives. While they scrambled to find linguistic expertise, the very person they needed was sitting quietly in their building, dismissed and forgotten. Tanaka's legendary composure finally cracked as he slammed his fist on the mahogany table, sending expensive pens scattering across legal documents that might never be signed. How can a company worth $200 billion not have access to proper translation services? He shouted, his voice echoing off the walls lined with awards and achievements that suddenly felt meaningless. The injustice of their situation was that they had everything money could buy except the one thing they actually needed. Emergency meetings were called and canceled as quickly as they were scheduled, with each postponement making Honda look more incompetent to their international partners. The hope that had sustained months of preparation was dissolving into panic as executives realized they were about to lose the biggest opportunity in the company's recent history due to something as basic as language barriers. Collins grabbed his phone again, his fingers trembling as he dialed number after number, each call ending in disappointment and growing desperation. The inspiration that had driven this ambitious global expansion was being crushed under the weight of their own limitations, exposing the fragility of an empire built on assumptions rather than actual capability. The mystery that would soon unfold was already present in their building, but their prejudice had made them blind to the solution walking their very halls. The screens around the conference room displayed countdown timers showing exactly how much time remained before the investors would likely withdraw from negotiations entirely. Each second that passed represented potential millions in lost revenue, as Honda's competitors were undoubtedly preparing their own offers to swoop in and claim the prize. The redemption story brewing beneath their notice would soon prove that the most valuable resources often come disguised as the least likely candidates. Tanaka stared at his reflection in the black screen of his tablet, seeing for the first time not a powerful CEO but a man whose carefully constructed world was crumbling because he had ignored the very people who could save him. The twist ending that was approaching would challenge everything these billionaire executives believed about intelligence, worth, and where true talent could be found. Angela continued her quiet work in the adjacent hallway, her sensitive ears picking up fragments of the crisis unfolding behind the conference room's closed doors. She understood more than anyone how these powerful people operated, having observed their behavior for years while remaining invisible to their notice. The survival story playing out was about more than just a business deal. It was about the consequences of treating people as if they were disposable, of building walls between different classes of human beings. Her son sat patiently nearby, his young mind processing the chaos he could hear through the walls while these stressed executives remained completely unaware of his presence. The shocking truth was that their salvation was sitting less than 50 feet away, dismissed and forgotten because of their own prejudicial blindness. The pressure reached a breaking point as Tanaka received a final ultimatum from the lead investor in Tokyo. Either the conference call would proceed with proper interpretation within the next 30 minutes, or the entire deal would be terminated permanently. The second chance that Honda desperately needed was slipping away like sand through their fingers, with each failed phone call bringing them closer to the kind of corporate catastrophe that would be studied in business schools for decades. Expensive consultants and crisis management experts were summoned, but even their combined expertise couldn't materialize qualified interpreters out of thin air. The secret revealed in the coming moments would expose just how disconnected these powerful people had become from the real world, where solutions often existed in the most unexpected places. The emotional tension in the room was so thick it could be cut with a knife as executives began pointing fingers and assigning blame for their impossible situation. Legal teams huddled over contracts that might become worthless paper if communications couldn't be established, while finance departments calculated the staggering losses that would result from a failed negotiation. The poor decision-making that had led to this crisis wasn't really about translation services, it was about a corporate culture that valued image over substance, connections over competence. Jordan remained in the hallway, his presence as overlooked as his potential, while the very people who had humiliated him earlier now faced the consequences of their own limitations. The true story reaching its climax would soon demonstrate that sometimes the most powerful person in any room is the one everyone underestimates. The final minutes before the ultimatum deadline ticked away like bombs in a countdown sequence, each second bringing Honda closer to a disaster that would reshape the entire automotive industry. Tanaka's phone buzzed with messages from board members, shareholders, and competitors, all watching to see whether the mighty Honda would stumble at the crucial moment. The heartwarming resolution that was about to unfold had its roots in this very moment of desperation, when pride and prejudice would finally meet their match in the form of an 8-year-old boy with gifts that none of these billionaire executives could comprehend. The mystery of how they would escape this impossible situation was about to be solved by someone they had written off before even bothering to learn his name. The tension in Honda's headquarters reached a boiling point as Richard Collins stumbled back into the conference room, his face flushed with failure after another unsuccessful attempt to secure emergency translation services. His expensive tie hung loose around his neck, and his usually perfect hair was disheveled from running his hands through it in frustration. "This is impossible," he announced to the room full of increasingly desperate executives, his voice cracking under the pressure of their collective stare. Kenji Tanaka's dark eyes burned with barely contained fury as he contemplated the professional humiliation that awaited them all if they couldn't solve this crisis within the next 20 minutes. The billionaire CEO had built his empire on precision and preparation, but today those qualities felt useless against a problem that seemed to have no solution. The irony wasn't lost on Sophia Bennett as she watched her male colleagues spiral into panic over a communication challenge that seemed insurmountable. She had been quietly observing the situation with the analytical mind that had earned her respect in Honda's male-dominated hierarchy, but even her extensive network of professional contacts had yielded nothing but dead ends and apologetic rejections. The emotional story playing out before her eyes was one of powerful people discovering the limits of their influence when faced with a problem that money couldn't immediately solve. The true story was that their arrogance had made them forget that real solutions often came from unexpected sources, and their prejudice had blinded them to resources that might be hiding in plain sight. Collins slumped into his leather chair with the defeated posture of a man watching his career implode in real time, his phone still buzzing with messages from increasingly impatient international partners. "We're going to lose everything," he muttered, loud enough for everyone in the room to hear. "Billions of dollars, years of work, our entire expansion into the electric vehicle market, all because we can't find someone who speaks a few different languages." The heartwarming twist that was about to unfold was completely invisible to him in that moment, hidden behind his own assumptions about where talent could and couldn't be found. The injustice of their situation felt cosmic. They had everything except the one thing they actually needed, and time was running out faster than water through a broken dam. Tanaka stood at the head of the conference table like a general surveying a battlefield where victory had slipped through his fingers, his reflection multiplied in the polished surface of the mahogany wood. The hope that had driven Honda's ambitious international expansion was dissolving into bitter reality as each passing minute brought them closer to professional catastrophe. "How is it possible," he asked the room, his voice heavy with disbelief, "that a company our size cannot secure basic translation services when we need them most?" The inspiration that had originally fueled this deal was being crushed under the weight of their own limitations, exposing the fragility of an empire built on assumptions rather than actual resources. The redemption story brewing just outside their awareness would soon teach them lessons about humility they would never forget. In his frustration and mounting panic, Collins let his mask of corporate professionalism slip completely, revealing the ugly prejudices that had always lurked beneath his polished exterior. At this point, he said with a bitter laugh that held no humor, "Even the cleaning lady's son probably understands more languages than our entire executive team." The words escaped his mouth before he could stop them, born from desperation and seasoned with the kind of casual racism that wealthy people often displayed when they thought nobody important was listening. The twist ending that was about to unfold had its roots in this exact moment of cruelty, when Collins unwittingly spoke a truth that would soon transform their entire situation. The mystery of how they would escape this crisis was about to be revealed by the very person he had just mocked. Sophia Bennett felt her breath catch in her throat as Collins's words hung in the air like smoke from a fire that would soon consume everything they thought they knew about intelligence and capability. She had been present during the morning's humiliation of Jordan and his mother, and something about this moment felt like the universe preparing to deliver cosmic justice to those who deserved it most. The survival story playing out wasn't just about Honda's business prospects. It was about the survival of basic human decency in a world where wealth had corrupted people's ability to see beyond their own narrow perspectives. The second chance that was approaching would give everyone in that room an opportunity to reevaluate their assumptions about worth, talent, and where true intelligence could be found. The sarcastic comment that Collins had intended as a bitter joke began to echo in the minds of everyone present, creating an uncomfortable silence that stretched across the room like a chasm between what they believed and what might actually be true. Tanaka's assistant shifted nervously by the door, her tablet still buzzing with increasingly urgent messages from investors who were losing patience with Honda's apparent incompetence. The poor planning that had created this crisis was about to be solved by the very person they had dismissed and humiliated earlier that morning. The emotional story reaching its turning point would soon prove that sometimes the cruelest words spoken in anger contain seeds of truth that can transform impossible situations into miraculous outcomes. Collins's bitter laughter died in his throat as the weight of his own words began to sink in, though he still couldn't see the solution that was literally walking the halls just outside their conference room. The shocking truth about to be revealed would make his casual cruelty feel prophetic, though not in the way he had intended. Angela's son, dismissed as worthless by these powerful executives, was about to become the most important person in the building. The secret revealed in the coming moments would expose the fundamental difference between education and intelligence, between privilege and actual ability. The injustice of their treatment of Jordan was about to be transformed into the very justice they desperately needed, delivered by the hands of someone they had deemed unworthy of their notice. The conference room's expensive technology hummed uselessly around them as Honda's executives faced the growing realization that all their wealth, connections, and corporate resources were powerless against a simple language barrier. The heartwarming resolution that was approaching would soon demonstrate that true talent doesn't always come wrapped in expensive packaging or prestigious degrees. Collins's throwaway comment about the cleaning lady's son was about to prove more accurate than anyone in that room could imagine, setting the stage for a revelation that would humble every person present. The true story of intelligence, capability, and human worth was about to unfold in ways that would shock them to their very core and change how they viewed the world forever. The mystery of their salvation was walking closer to the conference room with each passing moment, carried in the mind of a child who had learned to find strength in adversity and wisdom in hardship. The poor boy they had dismissed was about to become their unlikely savior, transforming Collins's cruel words into an unintentional prophecy that would save Honda's future and teach everyone present an unforgettable lesson about the true nature of human potential. Jordan Miller had been listening to the chaos unfolding behind the conference room doors for the past 20 minutes, his young mind processing the desperation in the adults' voices with the clarity that only children possess. The harsh fluorescent lights overhead cast long shadows across the hallway where he sat, his small frame dwarfed by the corporate grandeur surrounding him but his spirit undaunted by the morning's cruel treatment. When Richard Collins's bitter words about the cleaning lady's son understanding more languages drifted through the partially open door, something shifted inside Jordan's chest, not anger, but a quiet certainty that his moment had finally arrived. The emotional story about to unfold would transform him from an invisible child into the most important person in Honda's corporate empire, though none of the panicking executives could see it coming. Angela Williams was emptying waste baskets near the conference room when she noticed her son standing up with unusual determination. His dark eyes focused on the door where Honda's most powerful executives were facing their greatest crisis. She had raised Jordan to be humble and respectful, but she had also taught him to recognize when his unique gifts might be needed to help others, even those who had shown them nothing but contempt. The true story of her son's abilities was something she had kept carefully guarded, knowing that people often reacted with disbelief when they learned about his extraordinary linguistic talents. The heartwarming moment that was about to unfold had its roots in countless evenings spent at their small kitchen table, where Jordan had taught himself languages through library books and online resources while she worked multiple jobs to keep them afloat. The billionaire executives inside the conference room were so consumed by their own panic that they didn't notice the soft knock on their door, or the small voice that politely asked, "Excuse me, may I come in?" Tanaka was mid-sentence in another frantic phone call when Sophia Bennett, who had positioned herself nearest to the door, heard the interruption and looked up to see Jordan standing in the doorway. The injustice of the morning's events was about to be transformed into something beautiful as this dismissed child stepped forward to offer the very help these powerful people desperately needed. The hope that had been slowly dying in that room was about to be rekindled by someone they had written off as worthless before bothering to learn what he was truly capable of achieving. "I couldn't help but overhear," Jordan said softly, his voice carrying the quiet confidence that comes from knowing you possess something valuable, even when the world has told you otherwise. "You need someone who can translate between Japanese, Portuguese, German, Hindi, and Mandarin Chinese." The silence that fell over the room was so complete it felt like the building itself was holding its breath, waiting to see how these adults would respond to an offer of help from someone they had spent the morning humiliating. The inspiration behind Jordan's courage came not from arrogance but from his mother's teachings about using your gifts to help others, regardless of how they had treated you in the past. Collins was the first to recover from the shock, his face flushing red with embarrassment and renewed anger at what he perceived as a child's audacity. "This is ridiculous," he sputtered, his voice rising with indignation. "We don't have time for games. Security should escort this kid out immediately." But before he could reach for his phone, Jordan spoke again, this time switching effortlessly from English to perfect Japanese as he addressed Tanaka directly. "Tanaka-san, watashi wa junana no jango wa hanashimasu. Anata no kaisho wa tsukuru koto ga dekimasu." The redemption story unfolding in real time was about to shock every person present as they realized that this humble child was offering to save their entire company in flawless Japanese that put their expensive translation services to shame. Tanaka's coffee cup slipped from his nerveless fingers, the expensive china shattering against the marble floor as he stared at Jordan in complete disbelief. The child had just told him in perfect Japanese that he could speak 17 languages and was capable of helping Honda solve their crisis. The twist ending that nobody could have predicted was standing before them in worn sneakers and a backpack, offering linguistic abilities that seemed impossible for someone so young. That's impossible," Tanaka whispered, switching unconsciously to Japanese himself. Jordan smiled gently and responded in the same language, his pronunciation and grammar so flawless that it would have impressed university professors who had spent decades studying the complexities of Japanese honorific speech patterns. The mystery of Jordan's abilities began to unfold as he demonstrated his linguistic prowess by switching seamlessly between the 5 languages that Honda desperately needed for their international conference call. "Bom dia, como posso ajudá-los com a negociação," he said in perfect Portuguese, his accent so authentic it sounded like he had grown up in Sao Paulo. Then, without missing a beat, he continued in German, "Guten Morgen, ich kann Ihnen mit den technischen Übersetzungen helfen," before transitioning to Hindi with the same effortless fluency that left everyone in the room speechless. The survival story that had begun with his humiliation was transforming into something extraordinary as these powerful executives witnessed talents they had never imagined possible. Sophia Bennett felt tears welling in her eyes as she watched the transformation taking place before her, understanding that they were witnessing something truly miraculous unfold. The poor child who had been dismissed and excluded all morning was revealing himself to be exactly what they needed most. a linguistic genius who could navigate the complex world of international business communication with skills that surpassed anything money could buy. "How is this possible?" she whispered, her voice filled with wonder rather than skepticism. Jordan's response was simple and humble. "My mother always told me that knowledge is the only thing that nobody can take away from you, so I decided to collect as much as I could." The second chance that Honda had desperately needed was standing before them in the form of an 8-year-old boy whose gifts had been hidden beneath assumptions and prejudices that nearly cost them everything. Collins sat frozen in his chair, his earlier cruel words echoing in his mind as he realized that his sarcastic comment about the cleaning lady's son had been more prophetic than he could have ever imagined. The shocking truth was that while they had been measuring Jordan's worth by his mother's occupation and his humble appearance, they had completely missed the extraordinary intelligence and linguistic abilities that could save their company's future. The secret revealed in this moment would change how every person in that room viewed talent, potential, and the true meaning of human capability forever. The emotional story reaching its climax was about to transform from tragedy to triumph as Jordan stepped fully into the conference room, his small presence suddenly commanding the attention and respect of some of the most powerful people in the automotive industry. The heartwarming realization dawning on everyone present was that their salvation had been walking their halls all morning, dismissed and ignored because their prejudice had made them blind to the very gifts they desperately needed. The true story of Jordan Miller was just beginning to unfold, and it would prove that sometimes the most extraordinary abilities come packaged in the most humble circumstances, waiting for the right moment to shine and change the world. The conference room fell into stunned silence as Jordan Miller stepped forward with the quiet confidence of someone who understood exactly what needed to be done, his small hands folding neatly behind his back in a gesture that somehow commanded the respect of every billionaire executive present. The morning sun streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows seemed to spotlight this remarkable child as he prepared to demonstrate abilities that would shatter every assumption these powerful people had made about intelligence, worth, and where true talent could be found. Kenji Tanaka's sharp business mind, trained to recognize opportunity and assess capability, was struggling to process what he was witnessing as Jordan began to speak in fluent Mandarin to test the conference room's audio system. The emotional story unfolding before their eyes was about to prove that genius comes in forms that wealth and privilege often fail to recognize or appreciate. "Ladies and gentlemen," Jordan said, switching seamlessly to English with the poise of a seasoned professional, "I understand you need simultaneous interpretation for your international conference call. May I suggest we begin by establishing connections with each location so I can introduce myself to your partners in their native languages?" The true story of his linguistic mastery was about to unfold in real time as he moved toward the conference table with the natural authority of someone who had never doubted his own abilities, despite a morning filled with rejection and humiliation. Angela Williams watched from the doorway, her heart swelling with pride as her son transformed from invisible child to indispensable asset in the span of a single moment. The heartwarming revelation was that all those evenings spent studying at their small kitchen table had prepared Jordan for exactly this kind of moment. Sophia Bennett quickly activated the video conferencing system, her fingers trembling slightly as she realized they were about to witness something extraordinary. The screens flickered to life, displaying expectant faces from Sao Paulo, Mumbai, Frankfurt, and Tokyo, investors whose patience had been stretched to its breaking limit by Honda's apparent incompetence. The injustice of how Jordan had been treated earlier made his current moment of triumph even more powerful, as he prepared to save the very people who had dismissed him as worthless. Richard Collins sat paralyzed in his chair, watching his cruel words from earlier being transformed into prophecy as the cleaning lady's son prepared to demonstrate abilities that surpassed anything their expensive consulting firms could provide. Jordan approached the first screen displaying the Brazilian investors and began speaking in Portuguese so flawless and natural that it sounded like poetry flowing from his young lips. "Bom dia, senhores. Meu nome Jordan Miller, e estarei servindo como interpret para esta importante reunião. Peço desculpas pelo atraso, e garanto que agora podemos partir com total clareza na comunicação." The hope that had been dying in Honda's executive hearts began to rekindle as they watched their Brazilian partners' faces light up with surprise and approval at hearing their language spoken with such precision and respect. The inspiration behind Jordan's abilities wasn't just natural talent, it was the disciplined dedication of a child who had turned learning into an act of love and service to others. The demonstration continued as Jordan turned to the screen displaying their German partners, his transition between languages so smooth it seemed like magic to the awestruck executives. Guten Morgen, mein Herren. Ich bin Jordan Miller und die Word Hoot als Dolmetscher fungieren. Wir können nun mit den technischen Diskussionen über die Elektrofahrzeugpartnerschaft beginnen. The redemption story playing out before their eyes was about more than just business success. It was about the triumph of human potential over prejudice, of capability over assumptions, of character over circumstances. Tanaka found himself leaning forward in his chair, mesmerized by the 8-year-old who was casually solving problems that had seemed impossible just minutes earlier. When Jordan addressed their Indian partners in Hindi, even the most skeptical executives in the room began to understand that they were witnessing something truly exceptional. Namaste, main Jordan Miller Han or main AAJ AAP Sapki Liye Anuvadak Kakam Karunga. Helm of Honda Kia Electric Vehicle Partnership Kuber main detail main Charchao Kar Sokt Hang. The twist ending that was unfolding exceeded even the wildest imagination of everyone present, as this humble child revealed linguistic abilities that would have impressed diplomats and international scholars. The mystery of how someone so young could possess such sophisticated language skills was less important than the miraculous fact that he was here, now, when they needed him most desperately. The final test came as Jordan turned to address their Japanese partners, switching to the most formal and respectful honorific speech that left Tanaka himself speechless with admiration. Ohayo gozaimasu. Watashi wa Jordan Miller tamashimasu. Kyo wa Honda-san no taisetsu na kagi no tsuyaku wa sasit itadakimasu. Denki jidosha partnershipu no shouten wa kaishir dekimasu. The survival story of Honda's biggest deal was being transformed from potential disaster into guaranteed success by someone they had written off as insignificant. The second chance they had prayed for was standing before them in worn sneakers and a backpack, demonstrating abilities that money couldn't buy and privilege couldn't provide. The international partners on every screen were visibly impressed, their earlier frustration with Honda's communication problems evaporating as they experienced the rare pleasure of conducting business with someone who spoke their languages not just fluently, but with obvious respect and cultural understanding. The shocking truth dawning on everyone present was that Jordan wasn't just translating words, he was building bridges between cultures, facilitating understanding in ways that went far beyond mere linguistic competence. The poor child who had been excluded from their world all morning was now the most important person in it, his abilities transforming potential catastrophe into certain triumph. Collins felt his face burning with shame as he realized the magnitude of his earlier cruelty, understanding that his sarcastic comment about the cleaning lady's son had been more accurate than he could have ever imagined, but not in the mocking way he had intended. The secret revealed in this moment was that true intelligence often hides in the most unexpected places, dismissed by those who mistake privilege for ability and wealth for wisdom. Angela's tears of joy mixed with tears of vindication as she watched her son's gifts finally receive the recognition they deserved, transforming a day of humiliation into one of triumph that would be remembered forever. The emotional story reaching its crescendo was about the power of human potential to surprise, inspire, and transform impossible situations into miraculous outcomes. Jordan stood at the center of Honda's billion-dollar conference room, no longer invisible or insignificant, but revealed as the extraordinary young man his mother had always known him to be. The heartwarming truth was that while these executives had been looking for salvation in all the wrong places, it had been walking their halls all morning, waiting patiently for the chance to prove that true worth isn't measured by what you have, but by what you can give to others when they need it most. The atmosphere in Honda's conference room underwent a complete transformation as Jordan Miller seamlessly took control of what had moments earlier been an impossible situation, his young voice now the most important sound in a space where billion-dollar decisions were made daily. Kenji Tanaka, who had spent decades commanding boardrooms filled with the world's most powerful automotive executives, found himself in the unprecedented position of being completely dependent on an 8-year-old boy for his company's survival. The billionaire CEO's hands trembled slightly as he realized that all his wealth, influence, and corporate authority meant nothing without Jordan's extraordinary linguistic abilities to bridge the communication gap that threatened to destroy Honda's future. The emotional story playing out before everyone's eyes was a complete reversal of the morning's power dynamics, where the dismissed child had become the indispensable savior. Richard Collins sat frozen in his leather chair, his face pale with the dawning realization that his cruel mockery had inadvertently predicted the very solution they desperately needed. The poor executive who had built his career on privilege and connections was now watching helplessly as a child he had humiliated demonstrated capabilities that far exceeded anything Collins himself could offer. Jordan's calm professionalism stood in stark contrast to the panic that had consumed these supposedly superior adults just minutes earlier. The true story unfolding was about the complete inversion of authority, where the powerful had become powerless and the powerless had revealed themselves to be indispensable. The heartwarming irony was that Jordan showed no vindictiveness or desire for revenge, only a genuine willingness to help those who had treated him and his mother with nothing but contempt. Tanaka found himself unconsciously bowing slightly toward Jordan as the boy continued to facilitate flawless communication between Honda and their international partners, something that would have been unthinkable just an hour earlier. The injustice of the morning's treatment was being transformed into justice as Jordan's abilities commanded the respect and attention of everyone in the room. Each perfectly translated phrase, each cultural nuance he navigated with ease, each technical term he rendered precisely across multiple languages demonstrated a level of competence that these billionaire executives could barely comprehend. The hope that had nearly died in that conference room was being resurrected by someone they had deemed unworthy of basic courtesy, teaching them lessons about humility that no business school could provide. The international investors on the video screens were visibly impressed not just by Jordan's linguistic skills but by his professional demeanor and obvious intelligence, their earlier frustration with Honda completely forgotten as they experienced the rare pleasure of conducting business with someone who truly understood their languages and cultures. Sophia Bennett watched in amazement as Jordan handled complex automotive terminology, financial projections, and legal concepts with the ease of someone who had been doing this work for decades rather than minutes. The inspiration behind his remarkable abilities was becoming clear. This wasn't just natural talent but the result of years of dedicated self-education driven by curiosity and encouraged by a mother who believed in the power of knowledge. The redemption story reaching its peak was about the triumph of dedication over privilege, of character over circumstances. The power in the room had shifted so completely that Tanaka began deferring to Jordan's judgment on translation choices, asking for his advice on how to phrase certain concepts to ensure maximum clarity and cultural sensitivity. The twist ending that was still unfolding had transformed the corporate hierarchy in ways that would have seemed impossible that morning, with a child guiding adults through negotiations worth more than entire city budgets. Collins watched in stunned silence as Jordan effortlessly managed conversations in 5 languages simultaneously, his young mind processing and translating complex information faster than their expensive computer systems could have managed. The survival story of Honda's biggest deal was now being written by the very person they had tried to exclude from their world of power and privilege. Angela Williams stood in the doorway with tears streaming down her face, not from sadness but from overwhelming pride as she watched her son's gifts finally receive the recognition they deserved from people who mattered in the corporate world. The mystery of how Jordan had acquired such extraordinary abilities was less important than the miraculous fact that he was using them to save the company that employed his mother, demonstrating a generosity of spirit that shamed every adult in the room. The second chance that Honda had desperately needed was being delivered by someone who had every reason to walk away and leave them to face the consequences of their own prejudice and short-sightedness. Yet Jordan continued working with focused determination, proving that true character is revealed not by how you treat those who can help you, but by how you respond to those who have hurt you. The shocking truth was becoming impossible to ignore as Jordan handled increasingly complex negotiations with the kind of sophistication that typically required decades of international business experience. His translations weren't just linguistically accurate, they were culturally nuanced, professionally appropriate, and strategically brilliant in ways that impressed even the most experienced executives. The poor child who had been invisible to them all morning was now the center of their universe, his voice the bridge between Honda and billions of dollars in potential revenue. Tanaka realized that he was witnessing something that would fundamentally change how he viewed talent, intelligence, and the dangerous assumptions that wealth and power could create about human worth. The secret revealed in this remarkable demonstration was that Jordan's abilities extended far beyond simple translation. He was actually improving Honda's negotiating position by understanding cultural subtleties that their usual interpreters often missed. When the German investors expressed concerns about technical specifications, Jordan didn't just translate their words but also conveyed the underlying cultural expectations that would need to be addressed for the partnership to succeed. The emotional story reaching its climax was about the complete transformation of perception, where executives who had seen worthlessness now recognized extraordinary value, where dismissal had given way to dependence, where prejudice was being replaced by profound respect for capabilities they had never imagined possible. The heartwarming reality of the situation was that Jordan was not only saving Honda's biggest deal but actually improving it, his cultural intelligence and linguistic precision opening doors to deeper understanding and stronger partnerships than the company had ever achieved before. The true story of power had been completely rewritten in the span of 30 minutes, with authority flowing naturally toward the person who possessed the skills everyone needed rather than the person who held the highest title. Collins remained silent in his chair, his earlier arrogance replaced by the kind of humbling that comes when reality forces you to confront the ugliness of your own prejudices and the consequences of judging people by their circumstances rather than their character. The survival story of Honda's international expansion was being secured by the very person their corporate culture had been designed to exclude, proving that true intelligence and capability recognize no boundaries of class, race, or social position. As Jordan continued to facilitate flawless communication between continents, the mystery of how this day would end was becoming beautifully clear. The dismissed child would save the empire, the humble would inherit the boardroom, and justice would be served by the hands of someone who had suffered injustice with grace and dignity that shamed every adult present. 3 hours later, the impossible had become reality as Jordan Miller's extraordinary linguistic abilities secured the largest international partnership in Honda's corporate history, with contracts worth over $15 billion signed in 5 languages across 4 continents. The billionaire CEO Kenji Tanaka stood at the head of the conference table, his usually composed demeanor replaced by genuine emotion as he looked at the 8-year-old boy who had single-handedly saved his company's future when their most expensive consultants and resources had failed them completely. The emotional story that had begun with humiliation and exclusion was ending with triumph and recognition that would change lives forever. Richard Collins sat in stunned silence, his face a mixture of shame and amazement as he realized that his cruel sarcasm about the cleaning lady's son had been transformed into prophecy by a child whose abilities exceeded anything their elite corporate world could have imagined possible. The international investors on every screen were effusive in their praise, not just for Jordan's flawless translation services but for his professionalism, cultural sensitivity, and obvious intelligence that had impressed seasoned business executives across multiple continents. "Young man," said the lead investor from Tokyo in perfect English, "in 30 years of international business, I have never encountered someone with your remarkable combination of linguistic skill and business acumen. Honda is fortunate to have you." The true story of Jordan's transformation from invisible child to indispensable asset was being witnessed by some of the most powerful people in the global automotive industry, and their recognition would open doors that had been previously unimaginable for a boy from his humble background. Tanaka's hands were visibly shaking as he stood to address Jordan directly, his voice filled with the kind of respect typically reserved for fellow billionaires and heads of state. "Mr. Miller," he said, using the formal title that acknowledged Jordan's new status in their corporate hierarchy, "you have saved Honda today in ways that go far beyond simple translation services. Your abilities, your professionalism, and your character have impressed everyone present and secured partnerships that will benefit our company for decades to come." The heartwarming moment was made even more powerful by the presence of Angela Williams, who had been invited into the conference room to witness her son receive the recognition he had always deserved. The injustice of their earlier treatment was being transformed into a justice that would resonate through Honda's corporate culture for years to come. The redemption story reaching its crescendo was about more than just business success. It was about the fundamental transformation of how these powerful people viewed intelligence, worth, and the dangerous assumptions that privilege could create about human potential. Sophia Bennett approached Jordan with tears in her eyes, her voice filled with genuine admiration as she said, "You have taught us all lessons today that no business school could provide. Your mother should be incredibly proud of the remarkable young man she has raised." The hope that had nearly died in that conference room hours earlier had been resurrected by someone they had dismissed, and the inspiration of his example would influence Honda's hiring practices and corporate culture for generations to come. Collins finally found the courage to approach Jordan, his earlier arrogance completely stripped away by the humbling experience of witnessing true genius emerge from the most unexpected source. "Jordan," he said quietly, his voice barely above a whisper, "I owe you and your mother an apology that words cannot adequately express. My behavior this morning was inexcusable, and your grace in helping us despite how we treated you shows a character that I can only hope to someday emulate." The survival story that had played out in Honda's boardroom was complete, with the company's future secured by someone who had every reason to walk away and leave them to face the consequences of their own prejudice and blindness. Tanaka reached into his desk drawer and withdrew a document that would change Jordan's life forever, a full scholarship offered to any university in the world, funded by Honda's educational foundation, with a guarantee of employment in their international division upon graduation. "Your talents are too extraordinary to be left to chance," the CEO explained, his voice filled with genuine respect and admiration. "Honda would be honored to invest in your education and future, ensuring that abilities like yours are nurtured and developed to their full potential." The second chance that Jordan was being offered extended far beyond a single day's triumph. It was an opportunity to transform his family's circumstances forever through the power of recognized intelligence and character. The shocking truth that was finally being acknowledged by everyone present was that Jordan's abilities represented not just linguistic talent but the kind of cultural intelligence and intellectual capability that could reshape international business relationships in profound ways. The twist ending to this remarkable story was that Honda hadn't just survived a crisis, they had discovered an asset more valuable than any technology or financial resource they possessed. The mystery of how Jordan had acquired such extraordinary skills at such a young age was less important than the miraculous fact that he had chosen to use them to help those who had hurt him, demonstrating forgiveness and generosity that elevated everyone present. Angela Williams was offered an immediate promotion to Honda's facilities management team, with a salary increase that would finally allow her to provide the kind of life she had always dreamed of giving her son. The poor family that had struggled for years would now have opportunities that seemed impossible just that morning, all because Jordan had chosen to respond to cruelty with kindness and to exclusion with inclusion. The emotional story of their transformation was witnessed by some of the most influential people in the automotive industry, ensuring that word of Jordan's remarkable abilities and character would spread throughout the corporate world. The heartwarming reality was that justice had been served not through revenge but through redemption, not through bitterness but through brilliance. As the afternoon sun streamed through the conference room windows, Jordan stood surrounded by executives who had begun the day seeing him as insignificant and were ending it recognizing him as extraordinary. The true story of this remarkable day would be told and retold throughout Honda's corporate history, a reminder that talent and intelligence recognize no boundaries of class, race, or social position. The secret revealed in these final moments was that Jordan's greatest gift wasn't his linguistic abilities, it was his character, his willingness to help others despite their treatment of him, his grace under pressure, and his determination to use his gifts in service of something larger than himself. The final reward for Jordan's remarkable demonstration wasn't just the scholarship, the recognition, or even the transformation of his family's circumstances. It was the knowledge that he had proven the power of human potential to surprise, inspire, and transform even the most impossible situations. The survival story of Honda's biggest deal had become a triumph story of human dignity, character, and the extraordinary things that can happen when prejudice gives way to recognition, when exclusion transforms into inclusion, and when the dismissed prove themselves to be indispensable. As Jordan walked out of that conference room with his mother's hand in his, he carried with him not just the promise of a brighter future, but the satisfaction of having taught some of the world's most powerful people that true worth cannot be measured by circumstances, only by character, capability, and the courage to use your gifts when they are needed most.